Okay, so today I'm going to explain why Israel's Hasbara, or explanation. This is the translation of the word, meaning that Israel tries to explain why their narrative is the more humane and correct one in the Palestinian Israeli conflict, why this is going to fail, why Israel is doomed to fail in its Hasbara. There are three main reasons for this, and I will do them from the most obvious one, the biggest one, and then to the less obvious ones, and the ones that are less effective, I think, but they are still there. So the first, the biggest reason why Israel is going to fail in its Hasbara is because there are almost 2 billion Muslims in the world. And in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, of course, the Muslims are going to view, most of them at least, are going to view Israel as the bad party, and the Palestinians, which are mostly a Muslim population, as the good guys. And this works in many levels. First of all, because there are so many Muslims in the world, on par with Jews, which are about, I don't know, 20 million Jews around the world, then whenever you enter YouTube, the algorithm would work to the majority of people that view a certain content. So let's say most Muslims would view and create pro-Palestinian content and content that supports Palestinian narratives, then it is more likely that other people who are only mildly interested in the conflict, like humanitarian groups or other interested groups in the United States and Europe, they are going to view, the first thing that pops into their device is the pro-Muslim content and the pro-Palestinian content, because there are more people who are watching this and create this kind of content. So it really affects how people view something. Another thing that is also related to this is that whenever a state is involved in supporting Israel or not supporting Israel, the larger political significance of this would be to support the party that is more beneficial to your state. So supporting Israel and the Jews, even though there are some anti-Semitic ideas about how Jews control the world and control money, most leaders today, world leaders today, they really understand that the Arab and the Muslim world is much larger and much more influential than the small state of Israel and the Jewish people. So they're going to support them because it is going to be much more beneficial to your state. They have oil, they have much more people around the world, and much more military power. Perhaps Israel has a very strong regional army, but it is nothing compared to the billions of Muslims around there in the world. And them as consumers and as people is going to create much more fondness for states to support them, because it would also support your state because there's so much. Now, another thing that is related to the fact that there are so many Muslims in the world is when the media tries to know something, the Western media, let's say CNN, even Fox News, BBC, when they try to learn something, to know something about the Middle East, they are very much dependent on reporters who live in the area or reporters that are involved in the conflict. So if CNN wants to know what happens in Gaza, it needs to come to its freelance reporters and journalists. So when you go to these reporters and journalists, because there are so many Muslims in the world, most chances are you're going to get a Muslim or an Arab reporter that is involved in researching this conflict or being interested in the conflict, being involved in it. So most chances are you're going to get into a pro-Palestinian journalist or reporter, because there are so many Muslims, especially in the Middle East, but also around the world. So the percentage of pro-Israeli or non-Muslim reporters is very slim. And most chances are, most reports that you're going to get about the conflicts are from a pro-Palestinian one, because there are so many Muslims around the world. So this is the first reason. There are much more Muslims and Arabs in the world than there are Jews. The next thing, the second thing, which is why people around the world would usually are going to support the Palestinian cause and not the Israel one, and believe the Palestinian narrative, is because today in the academia, perhaps the academia is something that is not as influential as a number of people and the money involved, but the academia is something that is very much has very much transformed in the past 60, 70 years, especially after World War II, in which the narratives that control the discourse in the universities and the academia at large, and culture perhaps at large, Western culture at large, are anti-colonial and racial identity and gender studies, which are really to stress that white heterosexual European people are the bad guys in all of this. And the narrative goes that if you are non-white, if you are not Western in your thought, then you're probably the good guy, no matter what. This is the narrative that the humanities, since after World War II, really adopted. And so why Jews are considered as white, this is something that perhaps I'd do another video explaining that. But Jews are considered white and European by this agenda, by this narrative, even though it is not so, or not so exactly, or something like 50-60% of Jews in Israel are not from European descent, but let's leave it at that. But the view is that Jews are this white colonial force in this narrative, and everyone who fights against it, no matter how, is the good guy. If he is not Western, if he is not white, then he is probably the good guy. This is the narrative that is really embedded in everything. It's also embedded in the culture that is against empire. Even Star Wars is something that really stresses this narrative. Empire is bad. Anything that is somehow white, stormtroopers are white, somehow white, then you are a bad guy. You are something that is detrimental to the world. Okay, so this is another thing that really controls culture, Western culture and Western thought in the last 60, 70 years. So even in the Western world, Israel is considered the bad guy because of this, disregarding facts. The third one, which I think is the least important factor in making people support the Palestinian cause and not the Israeli one, is the anti-Semitism. Now, I don't believe that anti-Semitism is something so prevalent and vehement around the world, but it is there. People do believe, and there are many people, I don't think most people, but there are many people, even in the academia and on the top shelves of political control around the world, that believe that Jews somehow control the world. Jews somehow control the money. Jews are the cause for everything bad that happens in the world. All the wars, all the famines, all the diseases in the world, Jews are behind it. So if Israel is fighting someone, then this someone is probably the good guy. Okay, so these are the three main reasons why I think Jewish Hasbara or Israeli Hasbara is going to fail. Okay, so there are much more Muslims in the world, people in the academia who believe in culture, who believe that everything that is white is bad and Jews are considered white, and the third one is anti-Semitism. So these three factors are basically why Israeli Hasbara is going to fail, because people who want to read history and come to the Middle East and explore the place and really do a thorough research about which narrative is more close to the facts and which narrative is less wrong are a very small minority. The large number of people who are involved in this conflict who are not from the Middle East, they are fed by the media much lies and much misinformation, and this misinformation is based on these three facts, and these three facts are much stronger than common sense and reason. Think about